What is up, guys? Welcome to RMTV 2.0. This is the very first episode and is my very first time hosting for Virtual Motion. My name is Crystal and I'll be your host today. And I have a very, very special guest joining us for our very first episode of the season. She is a 5-time world champion in competitive Counter-Strike and longtime female pro gaming icon. And she's also now Counterlogic Gaming's Director of Esports Franchise Development and Outreach. I'm so excited to introduce Miss Harvey.
Hi.
Hello.
Hello.
Welcome. Thank you so much.
Happy to be here.
Oh, man. So I didn't want to get too far into an introduction because my very first question is just basically asking you, who you are, how did you get into gaming and esports, and kind of how did that develop a path into the career that you have today?
Yeah, absolutely. Well, as you mentioned, I have a long pedigree, I would say, in esports and gaming. I'm 34 years old. I'm French Canadian, and it does mean that I've been there for a while. If you're in esports and you're as old as me, that means you've been there almost since the beginning. So I kind of started. I started competing. I was 17, but that's in 2003 in a game called Counter-Strike. At the time, it was a 1.5 version, which led to me playing 1.6 and winning cups and that. But pretty much I've been gaming my whole life. I'm a lonely child, so I was very fortunate that my parents were super present and supportive of everything I did. So it didn't really matter if it was gaming or sports or whatnot, they're always there. So they supported me, even though esports then was not called esports. It was just video games, not even close to being what it is today. And they just believed in everything I wanted to do. So if my goal was to compete with my team, they supported me in that. So I continued my studies while competing. Back then, it was very out of the ordinary. I have a bachelor in architecture as well as a game design master. And then I worked in video game design for about 7 years. And during most of my design careers, I was competing on the side and winning cups. But the really interesting thing is that it was not cool. Like, even people within the game industry thought I was weird. So, you work in games in the early 2000s or late 2000s, and people think that you're weird for competing in the game. So that's how niche it was then, but now it's super mainstream. It's big. It's everything you hear about when you talk about gaming and how it fills stadiums and whatnot. So we're at a completely different crossroad, and I'm glad to still be here.
Absolutely. That is awesome. It's so cool because, so many people, especially like for us who have been in the industry for quite some time, like we all kind of jumped in just because we enjoyed playing video games. So it's this kind of now this neat bridge between, us who got into it because we love the games and we love the industry and we love the esports titles that have been developed and the industry that's growing. And now you're seeing more people that may not necessarily know so much about gaming and esports that are starting to come into the industry. So it's like this really cool connect now that didn't really exist in that time. And it's cool to see that growth. So my main thing is, I always say that esports is kind of like a blank canvas when it comes to educating, especially when it comes to people that are coming from outside of the industry. So as the director of esports franchise development and outreach at CLG, kind of what is your day-to-day like, and what are your favorite parts of that job?
Yeah, well, so when I was kind of thinking about retiring, there was nothing really that made me happy. I've always been a content creator. I was one of the early adopters of Twitch and streaming and whatnot. And it wasn't fulfilling to me, at least in my brain, at least in my thoughts, to just do content. Like I've always been someone that likes to take on challenge, break barriers and whatnot. So I really wanted to do more than that. And my goal at that point was to be able to give back. So creating resources for players to learn, to get better in their craft, whether it's physically, mentally, or in the game, and also just find ways to give back. But I was starting from zero at that point, other than my big dreams, and CLG, owned by Madison Square Garden now, contacted me to reconnect and start working at CLG again. And they kind of gave me also a blank canvas, which was like, what do you want to do? So I decided that I wanted to do that there with them. So give back, push for initiatives and whatnot. And my day-to-day is pretty much launching these projects and pushing them and making a difference and kind of doing a little bit what I want. But with my experience, I'm trying to figure out what is relevant with the amount of money and resources that we have to make the biggest impact, which I think that slowly but surely we're starting to do.
So, I mean, basically, you've had your hands in many different projects with your experience in gaming and esports, and you have a clothing line, correct?
Yeah, about 2 months ago, launched a clothing line called Elevate, which we have a great tagline for the clothing line, which is a digital citizenship company, which is a term I kind of saw once and I kind of stole it. I wasn't the inventor of it, but I'm certainly a big messenger. I talk about digital citizenship all the time. I think it's one of the most important things to think about when we talk about online education, and as well as respect and toxicity and just security and everything that you can think about. So with Elevate, we're trying to be more than just a clothing line. We're trying to make a difference in that sphere of the world as well, with the choices that we do take when it comes to creating the garments, but also the conversation pieces about the garment. But this is kind of step one, and step two is really going to be about defining what it means to be a digital citizen company. So what are we going to do with that? Are we going to lead that company from? And then the first brick was launching that collection number one.
Yeah, I checked it out a couple of nights ago. I was going to try to buy some stuff, and I feel like if I do right now, my bank account and my wife might murder me. But I really love the designs, and I love the message behind it. So I at least wanted to touch on that a little bit and get that out there, because I think that's really, really cool. Let's see. So, I mean, as we've stated, you've done a little bit of, I guess you could say, everything in the industry. I mean, you've been a content creator, you've played, you have your role now with CLG. But, we're starting to get to the point where we're slowly starting to see more women in these leadership roles. But obviously, more work needs to be done. But have you in particular faced any sort of specific barriers related to being a woman in the industry? And if so, how did you overcome those?
I want to say yes and no. I think that I have this tendency to surround myself with people that wouldn't even think about these boundaries. So I have to say, when I rejoined CLG, my boss was new at the company. He worked for Madison MSG over there in New York, and he was kind of taking on that leadership role at CLG. And I knew instantly I wanted him to be my boss, and I wanted to work with him. So with him, I've never had any boundaries, for example. He kind of lets me fly. And I think I shine when people are cutting that leash, when they let me fly. That's where I'm at my strongest. And so it has happened, unfortunately, where I got barriers and where I had to kind of suck it up and learn. But at some point, you will face decisions that will allow you to pick and choose who is going to be your boss, or which company you want to work for. And that's kind of what I did. I think when I was younger, these barriers were really big, and it took me a little bit to kind of see them, because society raises you as a woman not to see them, to kind of, it's cool, suck it up, just be part of the boys club. You're one of us, So you, in gaming especially, you become like a girl in a guy's locker room, and you kind of have to accept it that you are like one of them, or else they push you out of the locker room. So you don't really see these barriers until way later, when you become a mature woman and you read a lot about it, and you kind of get exposed to the other side of that coin, where you see, actually, I'm being discriminated, and it's just like accepted. And the guys don't even see it. I didn't even see it before. So I'm going to say, yes, it happens. And then that's where you can take the decision to accept it. You might have to accept it. I had to accept it sometimes, to progress and learn. But now I'm in a position where I don't have to accept it anymore, and I can forge my own path.
Mm-hmm. And I think that's the cool part about esports is that you can kind of create your own path and do what you feel like you need to do, because there's a lot of creativity in the industry. I mean, like for me, like my first esport, I call it my gateway esport, was Call of Duty. So, I mean, of course, esports and gaming in general is very male dominated, but Call of Duty in particular was just
Especially.
it was like jumping into the fire and not really expecting what was going to happen. And especially, for me, because at that time I was just a freelance writer. So jumping in and trying to get involved with the game in this atmosphere was definitely a bit of a journey. So,
Yeah.
I mean, there are different experiences for different people. And I think that, we're kind of getting to the point now where, it still happens, that toxicity is still there and it still exists. And it probably always will to a certain extent. Just because, unfortunately, I think gaming kind of has cultivated that type of culture, and it's kind of hard to kind of overcome that a little bit. But it's cool to see, people like you who have, worked through it. You've created your own path and developed, an amazing career in this field. And so especially now, more people are trying to get into it, specifically women who don't necessarily know where to begin. What advice would you give them?
Yeah, well, I would say one of the biggest advice I could give is probably one of the artists to apply is not to compare yourself with anyone. In a free market like esports, it's very similar to what I went through in just game development. There's not hundreds of years of people that have done your job before that it's like a regular, you need to do this job before you get to this job. Like there's not really a process. So people get hired and promoted all the time, left and right. And people with less experience will become your boss left and right. And you can't really, honestly, it's a question of luck, also knowing the right people. It just happens. So if you compare yourself to your peers, whether it's like another woman or even if it's like a guy, you will get your art crushed because you will get passed in front of. You will not get the job you probably are more qualified for. You might have to work much harder than anyone else to be in the same position that others who just got lucky. So the goal is not to compare yourself. The goal is to learn from the good things that other people are doing. And that nuance is really, really tricky. So if someone is successful, what did she do right? How can you learn from that person? And not bash down on yourself and say, I should have, or I could have, or I didn't. And more look at your own journey. Where are you? Are you progressing? Are you still learning? Are you getting more opportunities than last week? Or are you putting yourself out there more than a month ago? And if all of the answers are yes for you and you feel like you're progressing and you're reaching your tiny goals, then that's what matters. Because in the end, everybody, and I'm telling you, everybody, even the people at the top, if they compare themselves to others, they're all going to think that they are not good enough. And if even the people at the top thinks that they're not good enough compared to XYZ, then how can we win when we're just starting? There's no way we can win. So you really have to focus on growth, your own personal journey, and learn from others and be happy for someone else's success, and really surround yourself with a support system that will encourage that environment. That would have changed a lot in my I want to say youth, if someone had told me that, but I unfortunately had to learn the hard way, where I had years and years of comparing myself to everybody and feeling that I wasn't good enough or not worth it. And although I never gave up, I think it's because I'm stubborn. I didn't give up. And I don't want other people to have to go through that. Not everyone needs to be stubborn to succeed in this industry. So I think that if you're just looking at it from that mindset, it's going to be more effective.
Mm-hmm. And I think that really resonates with me in particular, because I feel like, for me, it's kind of a knee-jerk reaction to compare yourself to other people. And imposter syndrome, especially, is just, it can tear down, any sort of persistence and motivation that you have. So yeah, that's a really, really important message to send out. That's amazing. Thank you so much for that. So moving on, we have 3 final questions. I'm going to explain it just a little bit, considering this is the first time we've actually implemented this in the show. So Ritual Motion, while we have a focus on health and wellness, we tend to kind of focus on 3 keywords, which is mind, body, and soul. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to start with a question that corresponds with a specific keyword, like a question for mind, and then I'll let you just kind of answer it. They're fun, simple questions, and then we'll end it.
All right, let's do this. That's fun.
All right. So for mind, do you have a hobby outside of gaming that you enjoy that kind of pulls you away from work?
That's a difficult one because my hobby used to be gaming and now I'm working in gaming. So it's like, I try to get away from gaming by doing mindful activities such as reading or constructing something with my hands, like building something or drawing or writing or, so in COVID, it's hard to think about what activities you can do. So this is like really a COVID answer. But I've realized that reading comic books and mangas is my way of escaping gaming and kind of relaxing and still thinking about universe and stuff that I love in gaming.
That is awesome. Yeah, like for me, I enjoy boxing. So that's kind of why, because I mean, like I was like you too, like, we started gaming and that was our hobby. And then what do you do when it becomes your entire life? You have to find something else. Otherwise you go crazy in the process. So for body, which kind of relates to mind a little bit, but how do you create a work-life balance in order to avoid burnout?
Oh my God, that is such a difficult one. I think being very self-aware of how you feel. It's something that I developed in COVID. Like I've always knew I had issues, but with so much work always piling on, I was like, yeah, I have issues. One day I need to see a therapist, but like, I don't have time, but with COVID, it completely changed because therapists now can see you through the internet, but like just being aware of how I feel. Like if I'm tired, I actually take the time to sleep or take that nap or, if I feel like tense, I try to stretch. I schedule myself breaks too now. I also make sure that I have my walk with my dog on my calendar so that way I know I need to escape over there. So there's a lot of little things that I'm putting in my schedule to help with the burnout feeling. I'm usually working 7 days a week. I leave my calendar open all the time. So now I'm trying to take at least Sundays. It's not always working, but just knowing that it's okay to do nothing and it's okay to not be productive for one day in the week is a big challenge for me. I usually feel guilty for myself if I'm like watching a Netflix show and I'm like, oh, I should be working, so like I can never really relax. So I think that understanding that we all have our limits and focusing on my priorities as well as really debriefing with myself, I think has been crucial for me to try to avoid burnout and feeling like I'm drowning.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I think it's so weird when you talk about, people in this industry because, like for instance, having gaming as a hobby, like, for a lot of people, me included, that was also my escape. That was my way to de-stress and kind of get away from everything. And of course, now you can't do that. So
exactly.
You have to almost schedule breaks. You have to kind of like grow this discipline and make yourself understand that, having a break is a good thing and it's normal, and working 24/7, even if it's something that you love, is not going to be healthy for you. So that's awesome. All right. Last question for Soul. This it would be the hardest for me to answer. So I'm interested to see what you say. So you can only play one video game that isn't an esport for the rest of your life. Which one is it?
Well, I mean, the thing is that my favorite game is The Witcher 2. But if I only played The Witcher 2 for the rest of my life, I probably would really hate The Witcher because it's not like it's not perfect. There's a lot of flaws in the game, So I have to go with World of Warcraft. I mean, you can say it's esports. I don't even play WoW anymore, but if I had to play one game for the rest of my life, I have to pick World of Warcraft. It's just the game that has the most depth and overall interaction and community. Like, it would fit all the buckets that you need, because you could play the game. There's so much lore to explore. Like, each quest has tons of pages. Like, you don't realize when you play, because you're like skipping everything, but there's like a depth that some people try to achieve that's just really hard. Like, so probably World of Warcraft. Although, like, I don't even play anymore.
I love it. Yeah, I was trying to think of a question to ask, and I was like, I'm over here saying, yeah, 3 easy, fun questions, and I'm like, what, this is probably a little difficult, because I would not be able to pick a game to play for the rest of my life.
Other than that, I would just say obviously CS. I could play CS for the rest of my life. I'm okay with that.
Yeah, see, I'm the same way with Call of Duty, so yeah. I had to add in not an esport.
Yeah.
All right. Well, I think that's everything that we have. But thank you so much again for joining me. I really appreciate you taking your time to do so.
Thank you so much. Bye.
Bye. And to everyone watching, thank you so much for tuning in. This is the very first episode of season 2, and we have so many more things planned and in store, and I cannot wait to share them with all of you. But until then, we'll see you later.